and then we'll announce the silent auction winners after this last storyteller, who is one of my favorite storytellers, John O'Bear. And just a little bit about John. John is a professor of geography and environmental sciences at American River College. After realizing that his family was finally getting tired of hearing his stories, he was ecstatic to discover that he could tell them to strangers. He has taken the stage at numerous Moth Story Slams and has been featured as a storyteller at Capital Storytelling, Story Collider, and the Risk podcast. John was also a storytelling ambassador in 2022, and is now our assistant events producer, as well as a storytelling instructor and coach. He currently hosts Capital Storytelling's Do Tell, a monthly open mic for true personal stories. Come on up, John.
Okay, I gotta adjust the mic here. I'm not saying the others were short. It's a cold, rainy night in February 2019, and I'm sitting in a brew pub on the edge of downtown Sacramento, and I'm crying. And I've just experienced one of a small handful of moments in my life that changed me deeply. Now, something you should know about me is that I have either been a student and or an employee of the California State Public Education System for the last 55 years straight. And I am famous, in my own mind, for having taught every single grade from preschool through graduate school, all for at least one day. Now, there was a year in the early 90s where I was a substitute teacher, and I knocked out most of those because I taught whatever they told me to. Because groceries, I liked paying for my groceries. And the thread that ties through that entire 55 years are the stories that I heard, and some that I told, to classmates and my students and my teachers. And I've always loved stories, long before I learned that you could actually just stand up in front of strangers and tell stories. And as I think back to all of those stories, there are a few that are landmarks for me. I think of my third grade teacher, Mrs. Virgo. I was 8 years old and I loved her. Now, a little bit of that infatuation might have been because there was a day that she leaned over to help me with a math program and a math problem, and I discovered cleavage. But it goes way beyond that. She was an amazing person, and she encouraged us to write our stories down and to tell stories. And in return, she would write us personalized notes. So I remember on the Monday after Thanksgiving when I was in third grade, I was just blown away at our house because we had pizza the night before Thanksgiving. Somehow I thought this was the most exotic thing in the world. So I told her all about it. And her response was, well, if you think that's interesting, in my family, we're Italian, and for the main course on Thanksgiving, we had ravioli. And for me, that was just such a personal, intimate detail. She made me feel seen. In sixth grade, there was Marvin, and he was the class clown, and this guy lived for telling stories so funny that at lunchtime, his goal was to make you spit your food out. Better yet, shoot milk through your nose. He's hilarious. And when we all returned for seventh grade, he wasn't there. We learned that he had died of leukemia, but that's all we heard. And I think back, I wish somebody would have told us more about that. In high school, I graduated with a young woman by the name of Amber Keister. And that's it, no story, just the most epic high school name in the world. In college, I'm sure there were a lot of stories. I don't really remember them, because college. But eventually, I started to teach community college. And I was exposed to a mass of humanity. I've had thousands of students over the 25 years of my career. And I remember early on Carissa knocking on my door during an office hour and expressing concern for her performance. She wanted to do better. And we talked about study skills and we talked about time management. And eventually she confided in me that she feared her violent live-in boyfriend. And I had never had to confront something like this. A couple of months later, I was heartened to learn that she took the referral that I gave her that day and she was able to escape that relationship and build a new life. I think about the day that I was moving about a classroom of students all working on a project independently, and I stopped at this shiny, shiny ring. The student was about 6'7", 290 pounds, give or take a few pounds, and I didn't want to make any assumptions about any of my students, but I had to ask. I'm sorry, I have to ask, is that a Super Bowl ring? And he says, well, it's an AFC championship ring, which means that he played in the Super Bowl. He started in the Super Bowl. He sacked the quarterback in the Super Bowl. That's a pinnacle for a career of anybody in the NFL. So we talked about that, and again, I didn't want to offend him, but eventually I found a way to ask, so what brings you to my community college? And he says, well, I have family in the area, and I promised my mama when I finished with the NFL that I would finish college. He was a brilliant man, fascinating. I think about Derek, who knocked on my door, and he was about late 20s, early 30s. He came in and sat down, and we just talked about his goals in life, his aspirations, and he was an incredibly kind, gentle young man, but there was a sadness, there was a weight to him. We talked some more, and he ultimately let me know that he was a veteran. He had been an Army Ranger. And it came out that the limp that he walked with that he got at the Battle of Mogadishu, known infamously as the Black Hawk Down incident. He had seen horrific things in his life. Of course, there was a sadness and a weight to him. I've stayed in touch with him since. And then there's the story. In September 2018, I learned that a friend and coworker has gone through an unimaginable, horrific loss. And I text him, and I say, you don't have to answer, but I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. Please let me know if there's anything. And he briefly acknowledges me. And then I don't hear from him for 5 months. I hear from mutual friends that he has taken a leave of absence from work. And then finally, 5 months later, on a cold, rainy night in February 2019, we agree to meet for beers at a brew pub on the edge of Sacramento. And initially, we exchange pleasantries and small talk, and we talk about sports and football. We talk about mutually irritating colleagues. That's a huge topic. And at some point I say, T, I don't want to pretend that you haven't gone through this horrible, traumatic experience. And I want you to know you can feel free to talk about it or not talk about it as you see fit. I'm here for you. And he thanks me, and we continue to talk about mundane stuff. But then eventually he wades in to the very deep waters of his grief. And what he tells me is the most gripping, exquisitely painful tale of love, loss, trauma, and heartbreak that I have ever heard in my life. And it's not my story to tell. But in that moment, I felt as though I was living in real time his pain. And I felt at some molecular, chemical, genetic level that I was being changed, that there was some sort of organic empathy switch that was tripped inside of me. We both cried. And eventually we came up for air, and he said, I didn't mean to tell that story. I've only ever told that story to one other person. And I said, T, I'm honored that you would trust me. Thank you. We talked a little bit more, and I said, I know that you're probably not ready to tell that story, and you may never, ever want to tell that story, but I think you should at least write it down. I think that there are others out there who would find healing in your story. We talked a little bit more, and he brought up this organization called The Moth, which is a international organization that promotes true personal storytelling, much like we're doing now. And I said, you mean people just stand up on stage and they just tell personal stories? He said, yeah. And 3 months later, I went down to Berkeley and I put my name in the hat for the opportunity to tell the one story that I had wanted to tell, a deeply personal, vulnerable story about my relationship with my mom. And it was going to be in front of 400 people. And fortunately, that night, my name didn't get called because I wasn't ready to tell that story. But that experience led me directly to capital storytelling. And I have met the most beautiful family of friends and storytellers, and they mean the world to me. And of course, we share a love of stories, but we also share this deep curiosity, this innate sense, this wonder about the hidden stories that are always out there in a room like this. The stories of pain and loss, but also the stories of laughter and courage and resilience. And I got to tell you, there's one thing that I want more than to tell my stories, and that is to hear yours. Thank you.
Ooh, this is going to be fun.